Broadcasting live from addressing your cousin as cousin while on the phone. This is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Strother.
And I'm your other host, Seamus Connolly. And today we're talking Romancing the Stone in preparation for Argyle coming out next week. But this is a all-time classic. I'm very happy that we're doing this. This is my first time watching it for this show, and I have many things to say about everything. It's a whirlwind.
Well, fortunately, Seamus, you're gonna get to start right away because the one real piece of news that we have this week is talking about the massive layoffs that have been going on in the video game industry. And that is actually going to be part of our pop culture reference segment this week. So we're going to skip over that for now, come back to it after we talk Romancing the Stone.
Let's do it.
For today's main segment, we're going to be talking about Robert Zemeckis' 1984 adventure romp, Romancing the Stone. Seamus, I know you just mentioned up top that this is your first time seeing this movie. This is a childhood favorite for me, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
I thought this was a blast. I kind of tipped my hand a little bit at the intro of this episode, but I thought it was incredible. It was very funny. I thought the action was a lot of fun. This is the youngest I've ever seen Michael Douglas, and he is so unbelievably handsome. He appears on screen, his first appearance, and I was like, I don't know about this, because I was like, I could still just see like the Ant-Man 2 face of Michael Douglas, but then as soon as it got into a little more of the light, I was just like, oh wow, unbelievable. He was fantastic. Kathleen Turner's so funny and good in this. Also, perhaps the youngest I've ever seen Danny DeVito, and he is just like, he's barely a part of the actual plot, but he's just like, they cut away to him, and he's just hilarious physically and with his actual dialogue. It's fantastic. I really genuinely enjoy this. The soundtrack was incredible. I've been listening to that main theme for this movie. It's amazing. Alan Silvestri, beautiful stuff. I don't know. I was just so caught off guard because I really didn't do any real research. I knew why we were doing it for Argyle, and I kind of had a vague idea with Zemeckis going in here, but I loved it. I'm a big fan now.
Well, I also think it's interesting to see, like, you were talking about how young everybody is, and this is one of Zemeckis' earliest films. I think this is his third feature film after Can't Buy Me Love and Used Cars with Kurt Russell, which is also a great movie which you haven't seen, I think.
I have not. I have wanted to, trust me.
And Can't Buy Me Love is called I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's not Can't Buy Me Love. Can't Buy Me Love is a movie with Robert Downey Jr., but wrong Beatles song. I'm calling it right now.
You caught it.
So I think you can see a lot of the hallmarks of Zemeckis' later adventure film, because this is like really the first true adventure film that he made, and boy is it an adventure film. And seeing him pairing up, of course, with Alan Silvestri, who you mentioned already, who would then compose the greatest scores of Zemeckis' career, including Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Plus he's got literally like some of the font is in like the Back to the Future credits font, which I think is really interesting too. So overall, I think that this is a really outstanding adventure experience that stands on its own, because not only does it have super charming leads and its own personality, and it's shot really well by Dean Cundey. I think we would be remiss not to mention that. But in an era where so many things were cast in the shadow of Indiana Jones, this movie was actually written before Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. So even though it's obviously coming out 3 years after Raiders, and probably some of the things like having Michael Douglas wear a hat for a lot of the runtime could have been influenced by the popularity of Raiders, it really has its own identity as a piece of adventure media and a piece of like treasure hunting adventure media.
Yeah, There was a lot of stuff about this movie where for a minute it almost seemed like the treasure hunting was taking a back seat to a lot of other like very big adventure style events that were taking place, and then it definitely all wrapped back up into itself with the following clues and maps and all the danger and adventure and swinging from things. But it almost feels like the first adventure film ever written in a lot of ways. It's like like everything that I know about all the other like cornier adventure things is being done in this movie with a straight face, and I'm like buying all of it, even though it is still like very goofy and almost cartoony in a few spots, but not over the top.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's doing it with a straight face. I would say it's very winking, because the entire crux of the movie, down to the name, is it's a romance novel. This movie is a romance novel. And, like, she is a romance novelist that gets stuck in the plot of a romance novel. So it has the corniness of he's the perfect, gruff, adventurer. And he isn't exactly what she would expect the perfect, gruff adventurer to be. But in the end, we won't get into too many spoilers, but I think that it's all kind of right there in the title of course, the treasure hunting is taking a backseat, because what the movie is really about is the dynamic between the two leads. It's romancing the stone. It's not following the map to the stone.
Yeah, I guess doing it with a straight face was the wrong way to say that. It's like, I'm loving everything that's happening, even though it's like any other movie with all of this stuff that could be done today, I'd be like rolling my eyes. But when the corny, big, sweeping romantic moments are happening, even though it is winking at me, at the audience, it's like I'm 100% invested in how big and sweeping and romantic everything is. I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot of movies that would do that for me. I guess this feels like kind of the perfect mix of all of that together to deliver it to me in a way that I actually love everything about it.
I totally agree, and I think again Zemeckis is really finding his footing in this one, because I've never seen I Want to Hold Your Hand, but Used Cars, while fun, has a very inconsistent tone and very strange pacing, and he's alleviating a lot of those problems in this film, and I think it has an incredibly consistent tone. And even though there are definitely some jokes that are a little bit dated, I don't think they take you out of the movie as much as a lot of jokes from movies of this era would.
A lot like some of the jokes in the Back to the Future trilogy. Maybe some of those aren't super cool today, but they're a product of a bigger thing that is loved for a reason.
And I think weirdly they both part of the reason they both get away with it a little bit, other than the fact that they're inherently charming and don't dwell on those moments, is because that both of them are actively engaging with a bygone era. Back to the Future much more literally, right? Like, the entire crux of Back to the Future is, what if you took a kid from the 80s and put him in the 50s? He wouldn't like it. And this is, what if you took the pastiche of an era that has long gone away and in reality never existed, but overlaid it onto, once again, like, she is not only a fish out of water in that she's this like kind of uptight New Yorker in the Colombian jungle, but that also she is a woman of a modern woman of the 80s that has been thrust into a world that, as far as the movie is characterizing it, has not caught up with the modern era. And Michael Douglas personifies that as, like, he doesn't know that the Doobie Brothers broke up. He is a man out of time.
Yes.
We should probably, just because of the direction that our conversation is heading, probably get into spoilers soon. But I feel like we should note that Danny DeVito is just super good in this. I know we talked about it up top, but this is up there with Matilda as, like, one of the first movies I remember seeing Danny DeVito in, and just being utterly charmed by him. I hadn't seen this movie since I'd seen it, like, on videotape up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago when The Lost City came out, which is very transparently inspired by this movie and is almost kind of a remake of this movie. And the parts I remembered the most vividly were not, like, it wasn't the treasure hunting, it wasn't the adventure, it wasn't even really the leads. The parts of this movie I remembered the most in that, probably over 10-year period was the Danny DeVito parts because he is so funny.
He steals the show, and that's what he's best at, that Danny DeVito. He's a comic genius and actually a very, very good actor, so it's hard not to give him his props when he shows up in his prime acting days.
He is, absolutely. And then I think it's also worth noting, I don't believe that you've seen this, that late 80s sometime, so like a few years after this, Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner, and Danny DeVito would all re-team for the Danny DeVito directed The War of the Roses. So that obviously the three of them got along, and I think they all have really good chemistry that then carries on into that film.
That is, that's awesome. I definitely didn't know about that, but now I would love to check that out. That's awesome.
That is a Looney Tunes movie. I mean, Danny DeVito really takes these like Looney Tunes premises but he directs them like he's Brian De Palma. He's such a good director.
He is, though. Everything I've ever... Yeah, that is the truth about Danny DeVito.
But I think we should officially mark the spoiler threshold for Romancing the Stone.
Yes, where shall we begin? A kidnapping plot has never been so funny. I don't know. This is so all over the place, but it is also under the guise of like, her sister is gonna maybe get killed if she doesn't do all this stuff. It's very... Well, I guess it started and the janitor in her building got stabbed to death, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a darker movie, maybe. I didn't realize that it was going to be like this, and then it quickly unraveled in front of me.
Well, it's a very pulpy, even more than something like Indiana Jones, I think, in some ways. In that Indiana Jones's violence, sometimes it's pretty visceral, but it's usually not, I think, like, dwelled on in the same way. And its entire tone is more, like, brought down. Whereas in this, you can go 1 minute from, like, Danny DeVito doing silly slapstick of, like, falling off the side of the police desk into a man getting brutally stabbed to death. Like, really quickly those things can turn around.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now, besides the stabbing... It's really only a lot of, like, trading gunshots in the jungle. No one's ever really shot, I don't think. It's just a lot of, like, big white plume gunshots. Right up until a man's arm is ripped off by a Snappuh, That guy gets destroyed.
Look at those Snappuhs.
It's so brutal. And then, I mean, this is just a single moment, but I, like, winced when she whacks his, like, stump with the nail board.
Oh,
in that
it's
final
horrible.
Scene. That's just my own little single moment of just uncomfortableness about this movie.
That is the other thing I remembered really vividly, other than Danny DeVito, was like as a kid being like, "Oh my gosh!" like
comes out of nowhere, really. They're having a stand up, things are going down, but like, jeez, Louise, that's a lot.
I don't know if I must have seen this movie around the same time as Indiana Jones. I would imagine it was after Indiana Jones, but I couldn't tell you that for sure. It was a family movie night. We got it from the library on videotape on a Friday night. We watched it and it was a great time. But it's not just that a guy gets his arm bit off by an alligator, which is already crazy. But then that so much of the rest of the third act revolves around, we have to get the contents of this man's hand out of the stomach of this animal.
Oh, man.
Is really funny and also upsetting.
Like, they do that whole bit where I can't tell if it's supposed to be tense or goofy, where Michael Douglas is, like, trying to drag the striped gator back onto land. Mm-hmm. But then, Joan is getting, like, attacked with a knife on the tower. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's a very, I don't know, totally that single moment is very all over the place.
Which, I think we can rightfully criticize that, definitely to a point, but at the same time, I think it's so ingrained in the movies, like, get it? It's like a romance novel, and
yeah.
And then that moment becomes like a moment where she thinks that she is empowered, like she's empowered like the heroine of her romance novel, because it mirrors almost exactly the really fun Western opening that we get at the beginning of this movie, and then totally turns the tables on her, and then through what she learned from Michael Douglas, is able to hold her own a little bit more in real life. So it is making a distinction between the romance novel and the events of what's going on in the universe of the film. Also, I've got to call it out, that split diopter shot with her and the snappers.
Yes, where she's being pinned down on the top of the cage that's holding them, and it's like, oh, yeah, that was masterfully done. They only cut to it like a couple times, but I was eating that up.
It's a really good shot, and I mean, again, Dean Cundey, split diopter. Man knows what he's doing. I think Robert Zemeckis is learning what he's doing in this, and that the third act is a pretty compelling little action sequence, I think, considering the fact that it's really pretty tame by even the standards of the rest of the movie, I think. There are a couple of little moments also that I think that this movie walks a really fine line where it's not super problematic, but it's a little problematic in the way that it portrays the Colombian people. It doesn't make Colombia look like a super great place to go, which, you know, is part of the exotic setting of
Sure.
But it also isn't, for the most part, engaging in super egregious stereotyping. Or I think it's almost like the normal people that live in Colombia are almost not featured enough in this to be problematic.
Yeah, I'm watching this, I was almost like, this is Valverde, basically. Like, this is just like, insert South American country in an 80s adventure movie where there's like a military police force and a gangster, you know, military force, and they are clashing.
It's just like there's a criminal element, and then there is which is typical of the time, a militaristic element. So it kind of makes sense, I think. But you have little moments of the normal people of Colombia getting to be a little bit more human, and I think that like, I love when the bus driver just breaks the door clean off the bus as he's leaving after they get in the crash. That cracks me up.
Yeah, there's this running gag where like everybody just kind of speaks English and is like very fed up with Michael Douglas and being like, "Do you speak English?" There's a strange thing of that, but then also it's seemingly nobody really speaks English
except when I really love the drug dealer. He cracks me up.
Juan the funniest stuff. I knew the second they walked into that town and they were getting like eyeballed cowboy town style, I was like, they're gonna know her books. They're gonna be like, I love your books. And the fact that they got, like, that was my guess, and then they got me kinda, and then they also brought it all the way back around with Juan being like, these are the books I read you guys on Sundays. I love that whole gang.
Have you watched, how much of Barry have you watched?
2 seasons of Barry.
So I feel like it has a little bit of like the way NoHo Hank treats his guys to it.
That's exactly right. That is an incredible. I did not think of NoHo Hank, but now that is exactly what it is. Just like weirdly cheerful and nice. Like you love this guy who you know is like a bad dude. Like he murders people for sure, but you're like, oh, I love him. I love him. He's great.
And also, can't you hear NoHo Hank being like, the Xerox machine is broken.
yeah, dude. Oh man. Oh, that's good. Gushing over the books that you have. Take this copy. I have 10 others, or whatever he says. That is beautiful. Love it. I wish he stuck around more. I know that would have thrown off the balance of this movie a little bit more, unless if Danny DeVito was in the movie more, then I think Juan could have stuck around. Like they would have been each other's adversary, but Danny DeVito's just like he's just got a line on their whole adventure. He's just in the background, like I said before. Well,
I really wish that Juan got more of a goodbye, I think, because this is actually you brought up the 2 perfect things to talk about this, where Juan is dropping them off at the hotel, and you see that in the background, while, in a very well-blocked scene, I really love, it's all one shot, where Danny DeVito's in the foreground having one of his great phone scenes, of which he has several throughout this film, and then when Kathleen Turner is approaching, he hangs up, and then she becomes the focal point of the shot, and the camera circles around her to bring her more up close and come kind of behind her a little bit. And I think that's a moment of like Cundey and Zemeckis. I'm like, yeah, guys, you're figuring it out. You're doing a great job.
They had a good day that day on set. They were happy with that one.
Absolutely.
I was gonna bring up Zach Norman as Ira, his cousin, and maybe the funniest thing I've ever seen. I was like really like gut laughing with the "I'm gonna send the boat back for you" bit, which is really only like 30 seconds. But then they cut back to it and he's sailing away on the bigger ship, and he's like, I'll send it back. I couldn't believe how much I loved that. That was so funny.
That is, I think, one of you are aware that there is a second movie of this, yes?
You know that I definitely didn't know that, Garrett. Are you kidding me? Wait, for real?
The Jewel of the Nile, baby.
What? Wait, oh my god. Wait, so is Ira and Ralph, Danny DeVito, are they back?
Well, I think this is the great failing of the sequel, is that this does not bring Ira back. It is not the great, it's nothing, it's nowhere near as good as this. It's, like, fine. It still has the 3 leads, so it's enough to keep you going. And I think Holland Taylor is also maybe back as the sister. And it's been a long time since I've seen that one too.
That would be I'm gonna find that sometime. That is so that title almost sounds more familiar to me than Romancing the Stone did before I watched this.
For a long time it would be streaming and this one wouldn't be. So I wonder if there's like a weird rights thing with that, where I don't know enough about the behind the scenes of like if it switched studios. Again, it's been a really long time since I've seen Jewel of the Nile, and I've only seen it once. I didn't like it very much. It's like, again, I was entertained by it, I enjoyed it, but yeah, Zemeckis isn't back, which I think really shows. And I think that one, I also vaguely remember that one being engaging a lot more with like Egyptian stereotypes, which, you know,
that's
not great.
Yeah, we can. Like you said, the Columbia stuff in this, it just feels kind of just like how many 80s things were. It's just like, it's South America, it's in the jungle mostly anyway. It's in like nature. But that, yeah, you can't run into stuff like that. It becomes less and less acceptable when it's the sequel and it's worse and a lot less people are back and it's more problematic.
Yeah,
it's too
but
much.
I mean, I think it's still probably. I would not dissuade you from watching it at all, Seamus.
Well, I'm for sure gonna give that a shot. I'm sad Ira's not back, even though they definitely set up for Ira to be the Thanos of this this franchise.
Absolutely.
He's collecting the stones, Garrett. Don't you understand? He's trying to amass the stones.
The Corazon, the Jewel of the Nile.
That one doesn't have a fun name. It's just the Jewel of the Nile.
It's too. I don't remember.
That's okay. That's
too
okay.
long.
That's okay.
It's too long ago.
They could come back. They could do with the third one.
They could. I mean, everybody's still alive. They're so old, but everybody's still alive.
Yeah, they could pull it out.
I am glad that we could talk a little bit more about The Lost City, because I'm glad that The Lost City exists. Because I don't think that's a great movie, but it's the kind of movie we need more of, where it's taking a formula that is familiar, but adding a new twist on it. A lot of the appeal of that movie is that there are stars that you know and enjoy, and you're playing with their archetypes, which is, I think, something that we don't do enough with, it's a studio comedy, and I like a studio comedy that knows what to do with its stars, and it's aware enough of, Sandra Bullock is a romance novelist, and she gets whisked off on a journey that's like something straight out of her romance novels, and that's kind of where the similarities end, but it uses the intertextuality of assuming that you know a little bit about Romancing the Stone to have moments that mirror Romancing the Stone, but then are subverting it, but also totally works, I think, if you've not seen Romancing the Stone as well.
Well, I would recommend Romancing the Stone to pretty much anybody that I know. I'm kind of all about it, but I'm glad that I will have that intercontextuality when I finally. I don't think I'm gonna watch The Lost City. I'm gonna be honest with you, buddy.
You should. Daniel Radcliffe is really good in Lost City, and Shane, you like everybody in that movie. You like. I don't know if you like Sandy Bullock. I like Sandy Bullock.
I mean, I don't dislike Sandy Bullock for the most part. I don't think.
You like Channing Tatum. You like Brad Pitt. You like Daniel Radcliffe. I know those things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I like Romancing the Stone. Damn it.
And you like Romancing the Stone.
Damn it. Maybe I'll watch it with you. I feel like if anything, I would put on Romancing the Stone again. I don't know. Or I'd go watch Jewel of the Nile.
That's very fair. So, I mean, yeah, we could talk about that another time, but I think it's worth bringing into the conversation.
I mean,
here.
If you said to me if there was a movie I'd never heard of and you just said it's a little bit like Romancing the Stone, that's pretty much all you need to say at this point. Now that I have an awareness of what that even means. When The Lost City was coming out and you were like talking about Romancing the Stone, and I was just like, great, sounds like a pretty fun time. Like I didn't know then, Garrett. I didn't know, but
I know.
Truly,
and I was trying to tell you.
You did, and you probably were like, you should just check this out on your, for fun or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'll get to it or whatever, Like most things, I never got around to it until it was for this show, and I regret it deeply that I didn't do it earlier. But
well, I remember when we did Temple of Doom for the show, knowing that you had not seen this, I did not bring up the fact that this movie is how you do Willie and Indy without it being super annoying, and they came out the same year.
Wow, they did. They came out the same year.
Maybe
is that why is it just because like Temple of Doom stole all the jungle adventure thunder of that year, and like I only knew mostly about Temple of Doom?
I think this movie's pretty well regarded. I know, I talk to people. Not people our age, but I talk to people older than us, and people that were going to movies in 1984, and people are like, "Yeah, Romancing the Stone, that's a good movie." People know it, and obviously it had two of the biggest stars of the era.
Sure, that's true.
And Danny DeVito, having Danny DeVito in a movie in 1984 is like having Jake Johnson in a movie now.
Wow, that's a great comparison. But I just you said you got it from the library. I went to Blockbuster growing up. You'd think I would see the cover of that and be like, oh, we're gonna watch this, or I would know about it at least a little bit more than I did before yesterday. But it was fully under the radar for me. Maybe that was just my household.
And you were missing out on Danny DeVito running and blindly shooting a gun behind him without looking back.
It's crazy how much his physical running and indiscriminately shooting a revolver acting has not changed from Romancing the Stone to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It was like putting on a season 17 episode of It's Always Sunny when he's running over those hills just blasting or whatever. He does not care. It was weird as hell, but he's so good at it. Why would he change it anyway?
His physicality in this is some of his best physical work, I think. And because that's something that's interesting about him is I think often he's so glib and funny, and his appearance is inherently funny, that I think sometimes he's not allowed to do as much physical comedy as he should because he's so good at it. It's a little bit like Steve Martin in a way, where I feel like Steve Martin is one of the great physical comedians, but he's also so good at just delivering zingers that you can just why go through the process of figuring out how to give him physical comedy to do when you can just lob a softball zinger at him.
God, if it's the 80s and you put him in a fedora style hat, it's game over pretty much. He can slay it any which way. But this, I keep saying he was such a background character, and it's not like he doesn't have individual scenes as the focus of a lot of stuff, but he doesn't really affect much in the movie. And by the time we get to that third act and he just kind of disappears after that incredible boat bit, and not knowing that there was a sequel, I was just well, what the he's just gone then? There's never anything with the resolution of those two cousins. But I'm happy.
Well, he gets arrested, but so
I guess I don't know. It feels like not knowing that wasn't the end of that character, I was I wanted more of an end for that character, I guess is what I'm saying.
I also feel if you looked at that character in a script and were well, he doesn't need more of an ending than getting arrested because he's just, it's not that it's not written to be funny, but I think that character and that role are elevated a lot by the fact that Danny DeVito is the one playing him.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. They just didn't understand how one could perform that character and steal the show like he does until it happened, and then, well, I guess again spawned a sequel. Not too shabby, I suppose, but
the resolution payoffs for the other characters I think are really strong. Where when she comes around that corner and there's the boat and he's wearing the gator boots, and it just all comes together without a word being spoken. You understand everything, and that's such an elegant, nice way to end that movie. And then them going off on the cavernous New York street that is empty for some reason.
Yeah, so empty. Also, I mean, I love watching the people on the actual New York City street in the background of that shot, just like watching the shoot from the sidewalk. I thought that was fun. But then, like you're saying, watching them sail down onto their next adventure, well, that sax just wails on the soundtrack. I'm just like, great ending. I really, for a second, I was, I guess I forgot what movie I was watching, and I thought they might end it a little sad or ambiguous, but like, nope. God damn it, couldn't do that to her. Couldn't do that to him. It was a great way to wrap it up with a little bow there.
Absolutely. Also, one last thing when you bring up the sax, I think this soundtrack and the Midnight Run soundtrack are friends. I think they're super similar.
Wait, did Alan Silvestri do the Midnight Run soundtrack?
No, I almost think Hans Zimmer did the Midnight Run soundtrack.
Shut up, Garrett. Just
Hold on, I'm looking it up.
Here.
I'm looking it up.
That would blow my mind, truly.
I really think he did.
John Williams does the Midnight Run.
Sorry, it's Danny Elfman. It's Danny Elfman. You could forgive me mixing those up.
No, that's still kind of a little bit surprising. That maybe I need to rewatch Midnight Run.
I think all of us need to rewatch Midnight Run. I think it should just be, there should be a channel that you could just turn on and it's playing Midnight Run.
When I get to be an old man, that's gonna be like my Fox News, where it's just like on all day. It's just gonna be a loop of Midnight Run, and I'll be pretty happy with that probably.
And Romancing the Stone.
Yeah, I'll be like, back and forth. It'll be an endless marathon, old man live stream of Romancing the Stone, and I'll just talk about how the music is friends as a reference to a podcast from 2024.
And they'll all go, yes, the pop culture reference podcast, the most famous podcast ever, and
that one that dethroned Joe Rogan. Yeah, of course,
yeah.
The pop culture reference podcast.
It all started that one fateful day when they reviewed Romancing the Stone, and everybody was like, "Wow, finally a podcast brave enough to do it."
Oh my god, we're gonna wear our gator skin boots to our Hollywood Star ceremony, the first one ever for podcasts, of course.
Well, I think we've officially run out of things to say about Romancing the Stone, and I enjoy talking about this great movie with you, and I'm don't think Argyle's gonna live up to the thing that we covered in preparation for it, but
I straight up almost, at the end of this segment, even though I introed it as such, I almost forgot this was for Argyle. There's no way that Argyle is as good as Romancing the Stone. I'm sorry to call my shot right now, but there's no way.
There's no way, although dumb action stuff has been really surprising us lately, so there's always hope.
That's true. I can't, yeah, okay, that's fair. I'll see you all next week on the main segment when I definitely backpedal this statement.
But why don't we go ahead and move on over to our pop culture reference?
Let's do it.
For today's pop culture reference, we're talking about the massive 2024 video game layoffs. Gaming industry professionals already started off the year with a major blow when SAG-AFTRA voted in favor of permissions to allow studios to use AI voice generation over human voice acting talent. But this mass wave of layoffs across multiple publishers and studios only adds to the already bursting game industry bubble. Though small game developing teams that specialize in indie titles are gaining more recognition than ever in the gaming landscape, most AAA studios have hundreds, if not thousands, of dedicated employees that collectively work on projects that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make and generate billions on a global scale.
Some gaming industry heads have cited the overinflation of these staffing positions during the COVID-19 pandemic as a source of this now widespread issue, calling these layoffs something of a correction to that problem. Others speculate that the dwindling growth of the global gaming industry in 2023, the mounting criticisms of fans about unfinished products hitting the market, and the continually outrageous production budgets of AAA projects are the proof that the course of the game production industry is going in a critically damaging direction at the cost of hard-working professionals.
So far, about 26 game studios, publishers, and other gaming industry professionals have announced layoffs, adding up to almost 4,000 jobs lost in the first month of 2024. Most notably, after the rocky acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft just 3 months ago, 1,900 positions are to be terminated across Xbox, Activision Blizzard, and ZeniMax Media. Game engine designer and tech giant Unity also announced 1,800 in-house layoffs as part of their planned reset of the company, and is the largest single loss of personnel in the company's history. 30% of Call of Duty developer Sledgehammer Games positions, and 50% of Destroy All Humans and TMNT The Last Ronin developer Black Forest Games positions are also being cut.
So this has been in the last 3.5 weeks, pretty much. All of these are being announced left and right. I don't know if it's truly about an overstaffing problem because of the pandemic and things like that, but it's a very polarizing couple of years for gaming releases. It's either things that are entirely overbloated, over budget, not made with quality in mind, things like a Modern Warfare 3 or a Gollum. I almost want to play that horrible looking game. But there's also been incredible titles that seem to be focusing more on things like single player, story driven experiences that they don't generate. There's no battle pass for God of War or The Last of Us, things like that, but people are gravitating more towards that, I think, a lot more than ever right now, and people that make things like Call of Duty, Activision, Sledgehammer, they're really feeling the heat on that, I think, a lot more now than ever.
Definitely agree, and I think it's also interesting. I was just reading an article a few months ago before these layoffs happened about how, even though gaming is still, like the most popular pastime globally and all this stuff, that there has been a significant hit in, that there was an artificial bubble created by COVID in terms of like player bases and the amount that people were willing to spend on video games. And I think the fact that this new generation of consoles came out in the midst of everybody suddenly having a bunch of time to spend at home and wanting to look for digital outlets probably compounded that. So I think that it's also like definitely a indication of kind of like we've been seeing with the streaming industry lately, a bunch of studios having the hubris to be like, this'll last forever.
Yeah, the idea of like 10 seasons of a roadmap for a multiplayer game that is free, but 75% of content is locked behind a paywall that you have to engage with. That's like the most popular model. Games is even something like, we talked about the upcoming Suicide Squad game and how that was like nabbed by higher ups demanding things like a battle pass and a live service. Games as a service format that they've been inching more towards. It's just bad news bears when it gets to a boiling point like this, but the people who are really suffering are all the dedicated people that are working on projects like that getting laid off in mass. It is not looking great.
No, it isn't. But we will definitely, who knows if this will be the end of these? I suspect it won't be, but it's been happening so much that we felt like we had to do kind of a larger overview of what's going on and where the trends are heading, and we will be continuing to monitor what's going on in the game industry as it develops.
But what do you say we head on over and save the rec center?
Let's save it, Seamus. Save the rec center!
Now it's time to save the rec center, where we give you our weekly recommendations. Garrett, what do you got for me this week?
Well, at time of recording, it's the end of January, which, as you know, is when I'm always trying to run and catch up and round up all the 2023, or the movies of the previous year, in this case 2023, movies that I did not see during the course of the year. And last night, I went onto Stars and I watched the new adaptation of Judy Blume's prolific novel, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margret. And I certainly am not the target demographic for that film, and I found it tremendously moving. I thought it was great. I think it's honestly one of the best movies of 2023. It is effortlessly and utterly charming, with a fantastic Rachel McAdams performance that probably could have taken America Ferrera's Oscar nomination position as Best Supporting Actress, and a star turn from Abby Ryder Fortson, who is playing Margret. And I looked up today, I was like, she seems really familiar, but she's so young, I don't know what I must know her from. She is the daughter in the Ant-Man movies.
Oh, wait, the first daughter or the second daughter?
Like the first daughter, like the little.
Wow, okay.
Daughter. She's tremendous and shows an incredible emotional range, I think, for an actor of her age, and is holding toe-to-toe with, Her parents in the movie are Rachel McAdams and Benny Safdie, who are two pretty good freaking actors.
Yeah, you can say that again.
And Kathy Bates is also doing a great job as the grandmother. And I was just really, I went in expecting to like it and to be charmed, and it was by Kelly Freeman Craig, who is also the director of Edge of 17. So I was like, that's a girls coming of age movie that I enjoyed quite a lot a few years ago, and so I expected to like this, but I was really blown away. I think it's an instant classic. I can't believe it wasn't discussed more. I think, frankly, Rachel McAdams has been under-discussed in the awards conversation, and it's really worth going to check out. If you don't have Stars, go to your local library and find it, because I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, I will definitely check that out. I had my time with Judy Blume back in the day. I never read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margret. I don't know what it's about. I have just made that, I've just said that line about 100 billion times in my life as some kind of referential joke that I do not get. So I think maybe now it's time to finally get with the times. Go try that out. I love pretty much everyone in the cast that you just said, and it'll be weird to see Benny Safdie do like a what sounds like a very wholesome kind of film like that. I feel like I'm used to him in more gritty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's great at. I was a little bit skeptical of that because sometimes he shows up in something I'm like, you really need Benny Safdie in this.
Well, I'm glad that didn't break your experience with this movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. But what do you have this week, Seamus?
This week, I have been enjoying the musical stylings of Osamu Sato, the Japanese digital media artist, most famous for his creation of the PS1 game LSD Dream Emulator. Are you familiar with this, Garrett?
I am familiar. I don't know the guy, but I'm familiar with with the existence of the game.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, he has been an incredible digital artist since the 80s. He does incredible photography series. He obviously does interactive digital art like his PS1 and early point-and-click adventure games, but I really want to shout out his music today. I've been listening to like pretty much his entire discography nonstop this week, and it's very much what you would find in something like an LSD Dream Emulator style game. Very frantic, digital heavy beats that are more abstract than what a traditional piece of music would be, but it really puts you in this dreamy trance that he finds himself in a lot with his individual music specific creations. I kept trying to describe it to other people this week as like, it's like you're having a dream where you're late for something, kind of, and that doesn't sound like an enjoyable time. But if you're really getting into the groove of working on something, or you need to focus on something, it's like dream soundscapes a lot of the time, and it's just a very almost geometry feeling kind of rhythms that he gets into. It's like you can feel the shapes and the ideas that he's working with. So I wanted to specifically shout out LSD and Remixes, his work on his very famous LSD Dream Emulator video game, and also of the same year, 1998, Lucy in the Sky with Dynamites. It's a kind of a lesser known one, but it's a lot more groovy than frantic, which I feel like a lot of his other stuff turns out to be a lot of the time. I mean, very enjoyable still, but definitely those two I'm highlighting for you this week.
Well, that sounds like something I would enjoy, and I'm definitely going to look at it. A lot of the time I'm like, yeah, Seamus, that sounds nice. But I think I genuinely will go check that out. That is of great interest to me, and I will request that you send me a link directly because I'm that guy. But
no, you got it, man. You got it. You get lost in it. You can end up listening to a whole album and you almost don't even realize it until it wraps up. It's definitely worth checking out. So I'll hook it up for you.
But I think that wraps us up for this week's episode of Pop Culture Reference. If you want to reach the show on TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram, you can find us at PCR_podcast. Email us at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and interact with us in any way you can on any platform. It really helps the show out. Next week, we will, as previously forecast, be covering the most discussed movie of the year, Seamus, Argyle, which I am looking forward to, I think more than most people are, and I agree that it probably isn't going to be any Romancing the Stone, but I'm excited to find out.
I am too, man. I'm looking forward to this crazy looking cast. John Cena is there, from what I hear. You know, I'm excited, very much so.
You can't see it, but I'm waving my hand in front of my face.
God, yeah, I wouldn't be able to see it, would I, Garrett?
No, here's the thing, Seamus. You can't see me.
Oh, God, yeah. What we love John Cena for, his wrestling career, you know?
That's what I've always said. You know what a huge wrestling fan I am.
WWE heads over here.
Well, everybody, we will not see you next week.
Adios, amigos. That just works because they were in Colombia in this movie.